Here's a paradox for you. The most powerful house on Earth, the place where decisions are made that shape the fate of millions, is often haunted not by spies or missiles, but by the pettiest of problems. From poisoned letters intercepted at the gate, to a single stalk of broccoli banished from the presidential dinner table. You might be wondering, how on earth does a vegetable kid's hate suddenly become a matter of national security? But that's the truth. The White House has banned not only explosives and espionage, but at times, squirrels, balloons, and yes, even blue jeans. And that tells us something important. Power doesn't just live in grand laws or treaties. It seeps into the tiniest details, cultural quirks, private fears, even the moods of a president. A brick in the White House may be tied to war, but a squirrel in the garden can still trigger its own little battle. Funny, yes, but real all the same. So today, through the eyes of a historian who has spent far too many nights buried in dusty archives, let's wander into the strangest bans ever imposed at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Behind all the ceremony and solemnity lies a gallery of absurd, human, and sometimes unbelievable stories. And we begin with the most unlikely enemy of them all, the squirrels. If you think White House security is only about guarding against spies, terrorists, or rogue drones, think again. Sometimes the troublemakers aren't armed infiltrators at all. They are small, furry, and deceptively cute. Back in 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, yes, the same man who commanded Allied forces in World War II, decided he needed a way to relax between meetings. So, he installed a little putting green on the South Lawn. A wartime general trading tanks for golf clubs, it sounded like a peaceful retirement hobby tucked inside the most stressful job in the world. But then came the enemy, the squirrels of Washington, D.C. They weren't interested in NATO treaties or Cold War negotiations. Their agenda was simpler: dig holes, bury nuts, and tear up Ike's perfectly manicured turf. Eisenhower was furious. Legend has it he barked at his valet, "If you see another squirrel on my green, shoot it." No shots were ever fired, of course, but the situation was serious enough that the Secret Service actually launched Operation Squirrel. Yes, that's what the papers called it. Instead of chasing Soviet spies, Nazis, agents were busy trapping and relocating a brigade of bushy-tailed vandals. Newspapers had a field day, animal rights groups protested, and Eisenhower's private golf paradise became a national punchline. The irony was hard to miss. A man who helped defeat fascism was now rattled by rodents with tiny shovels for hands. The lesson? Even the most powerful leaders find themselves at war with the everyday annoyances of life. Sometimes a chewed-up lawn can irritate more than an opposition speech. If Eisenhower's headaches came from squirrels outside, President Joe Biden's came from the family dogs inside. Major and Commander, two German shepherds, were supposed to be symbols of warmth and loyalty, a friendly face of the presidency. Instead, they developed a habit of nipping staff and Secret Service agents. Officially, at least 11 biting incidents were logged. Unofficial whispers put the tally even higher. The absurdity writes itself. Secret Service agents, trained to confront terrorists, suddenly had to dodge a presidential pet. The most heavily guarded house in America had a security breach not from spies, but from a pair of canine teeth. Eventually, Major was sent to live with friends in Delaware. Commander, despite being younger and stronger, followed the same fate after repeated incidents. Some wry commentators called it the four-legged security crisis. American history is full of executive orders, freeing the slaves, ending segregation, opening new trade routes. But in 1990, the nation witnessed a far stranger kind of decree: the banishment of broccoli. President George H.W. Bush, former WW2 fighter pilot, man of action, stood at a press conference and declared, "I do not like broccoli. I'm President of the United States, and I'm not going to eat any more broccoli." What sounded like a childhood tantrum instantly became White House policy. Broccoli vanished from official menus, even on Air Force One. Suddenly, a country that had been arguing about the Cold War, taxes, and the Constitution was now split over a vegetable. California's broccoli farmers, not amused, shipped 10 tons of the stuff to Washington in protest. Bush coolly sent it all to food banks, turning a vegetable war into a charitable gesture. And so the humble broccoli, a vegetable hated by kids across America, briefly became a matter of state. As one historian quipped, sometimes politics isn't written in 200-page bills, but in what sits on the dinner plate of a president. The paradox? A man entrusted with the nuclear codes took his firmest stand against a cruciferous green. If broccoli was a matter of taste, alcohol in the White House was a question of morality and social politics. Travel back to the 1870s. First Lady Lucy Hayes, wife of Rutherford B. Hayes, was a devout Methodist. She believed serving alcohol at the White House set a poor example. So instead of wine or whiskey, guests were offered lemonade and fruit punch. Her nickname became Lemonade Lucy. Foreign diplomats were less than thrilled. One French envoy joked, "In the Hayes White House, the driest thing isn't the speeches, it's the parties." And indeed, receptions gained a reputation for being painfully sober. Many joked you had to stop for a drink before arriving.
Yes.
Later, Eleanor Roosevelt in the 1930s took a softer approach. No hard liquor, but wine was allowed at state dinners. It was a compromise, still sending a message about temperance while avoiding total dryness. But here's the irony. Other presidents loved their drinks. FDR enjoyed a martini, JFK sipped daiquiris, and Lyndon B. Johnson famously poured scotch for guests at his Texas ranch. So, depending on who was in charge, the White House swung wildly from bone-dry to borderline cocktail lounge. If alcohol was about morality, then the Christmas tree was about environmental philosophy. Legend has it that President Theodore Roosevelt, the great conservationist, once banned the cutting of Christmas trees in the White House. His reasoning: felling a tree for mere decoration was wasteful, a betrayal of his conservationist ideals. But his son Archie thought differently. He smuggled a small tree into his room, keeping the family tradition alive in secret. It was a father-son standoff over Yuletide, but symbolized a bigger clash: cultural tradition versus ecological responsibility. Eventually, the Christmas tree returned to the White House, but the story lived on, both amusing and profound. On one hand, people laughed. Even the president couldn't win a Christmas battle against his own kid. On the other, it sparked reflection. How many traditions do we keep simply out of habit? And how many should we rethink for the sake of the future? Today, no one bats an eye if a woman walks through the White House in slacks. But for most of the 20th century, it was quietly frowned upon. There was no law, no official rule, but an unwritten code hung in the air. Women, whether staff or guests, were expected to wear dresses or skirts. That all began to change in the 1970s, partly thanks to the energy crisis. With thermostats turned down to save fuel, the White House became drafty and cold. Female staff shivered in their skirts until, for sheer survival, they put on pants. It sounds almost comical. The women's rights revolution inside the White House, sparked by a broken heater. But look closer, and you see a cultural shift. From that small change in wardrobe came a signal of something larger. A society moving from rigid formality to practical equality. The paradox is clear. An economic decision about heating bills accidentally opened the door to personal freedom. If women once had to fight to wear pants, men faced a different battleground: jeans. President George W. Bush, known for his ranch hand style in Texas, was surprisingly strict inside the Oval Office. His rule: no jeans. Even on weekends, he wanted the office to project respect and formality. To Bush, denim represented casual grit, not the gravitas of a presidential desk. And yet, there was one exception: Bono, the front man of U2. The rock star strode into the Oval Office in black jeans, and no one dared tell him to change. The irony was delicious. A White House aide in denim would be out of order. But Bono in denim? That was perfectly acceptable because, well, it was Bono. This reveals a deeper truth. White House protocol may be strict, but cultural clout can sometimes outweigh political power. A single pair of jeans showed how political authority and pop culture can collide and occasionally laugh at each other. If clothing mirrors cultural norms, smoking reflects entire eras of public health. Mid-20th century White House photos are a haze of cigar smoke. Franklin D. Roosevelt puffed away while steering America through war. John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson kept cigars close at hand. At the time, tobacco was a prop of power, an accessory like a coffee cup today. But by the 1990s, the winds had shifted. The anti-smoking movement had swept across America. First Lady Hillary Clinton declared the White House a smoke-free zone indoors. The symbolism was striking. What was once a sign of elegance and authority had now become a social liability. Even President Bill Clinton, who loved holding a cigar, had to adapt, chewing on unlit stogies instead, a strange compromise between habit and regulation. And there lies a beautiful paradox of history. A product once synonymous with masculine prestige was pushed out to the porch by the very house that once glorified it. It sounds like a comedy sketch, but it really happened. A bunch of helium balloons once forced the White House into lockdown. In 2016, when a cluster of balloons floated across the South Lawn, the Secret Service went on high alert. Why? Because the sound of a balloon popping can be mistaken for gunfire, and in the most sensitive security zone in the country, every pop is a potential shot. So doors slammed shut, reporters were pushed back, officials were rushed underground, all because of a few drifting balloons. Only when the balloons deflated harmlessly did everyone breathe again. The paradox. A nation with enough nuclear weapons to level the planet was thrown off balance by rubber and helium. If balloons were a misunderstanding, selfie sticks were a migraine waiting to happen. To tourists, it's just a tool for taking photos. To security, it's a potential club, a risk to priceless artifacts, or even a makeshift weapon. Picture it, a glittering state dinner, crystal glasses clinking, and then a selfie stick swings through the room, smacking a chandelier or worse, a head of state. So the rule became simple, no selfie sticks in the White House, period. In the age of security obsession, even weapons of mass selfie had to be banned. If selfie sticks are trouble on the ground, drones are chaos in the air. In 2015, a drone slipped over the fence and crash-landed on the White House lawn. The operator, an off-duty government employee who was just messing around and lost control. The incident sent the Secret Service scrambling. If a toy drone could breach the airspace, what else could? Washington, D.C., quickly became a strict no-drone zone, equipped with electronic defenses ready to knock intruders out of the sky. A modern paradox. Technology designed for fun can, in the wrong place, turn into a national security crisis. For most of us, the smartphone is an extra limb, but in the White House, it was once treated as a threat. In 2018, Chief of Staff John Kelly banned personal phones in the West Wing. The fear? Sensitive information leaking, or worse, foreign governments listening in. Staffers had to lock up their smartphones and use clunky government-issued devices, slow, outdated, beeping like relics from the 1990s. The sight was almost comic. Young staffers, used to sleek iPhones, suddenly reduced to paging each other like it was the Cold War. The West Wing became, in effect, a smartphone rehab center. And if balloons and drones sound like modern quirks, the most chilling threat came from something old-fashioned: the mail. In the weeks after 9/11, letters laced with anthrax spores were sent through the U.S. postal system, including some addressed to the White House. The toll was deadly: 5 people killed, 17 sickened. Since then, all White House mail is screened and irradiated off-site. It didn't stop with anthrax. In 2013, a ricin-laced letter was sent to President Obama. In 2020, another was intercepted before reaching President Trump. Fortunately, both were caught in time and the senders arrested. The lesson? Even in an age of high-tech threats, an ordinary envelope can carry lethal danger. In 2009, the Obama White House hosted its very first state dinner. The guest list was vetted, security was tight, every detail rehearsed. And yet somehow Michael and Terk Salahi, an ambitious couple chasing reality TV fame, waltzed right in. They didn't scale a fence or sneak through a window. They dressed well, smiled at the right people, and looked like they belonged. That was enough to slip past security, shake hands with officials, and even pose for photos with Vice President Joe Biden. When those photos appeared on Facebook, the truth broke. Two complete outsiders had made it into one of the most exclusive dinners in America. The press dubbed it the Great Gate Crash of the White House. And the irony, while balloons, drones, and poison letters were meticulously blocked, a confident smile was all it took to breach the system. Sometimes the world's top security can be fooled by the art of simply acting like you belong. Back in part 3, we looked at George W. Bush's no-denim rule in the Oval Office. Suits only, no jeans allowed. But history always leaves room for exceptions. Enter Bono, the iconic U2 frontman. When he visited the White House, he wore his trademark black jeans, and nobody dared send him packing. Why? Because Bono wasn't just a rock star. He was a global cultural figure, a campaigner for human rights and poverty relief. In that moment, his cultural capital bent the Oval Office dress code. It's a revealing truth. Pop culture can sometimes bend even the stiffest political rules. The White House may symbolize hard power, but it cannot entirely ignore the soft power of a global icon in denim. If Bono broke the dress code, First Lady Michelle Obama broke the photo ban. For 40 years, visitors on White House tours were forbidden from taking pictures. The official reason? Flash damage and crowd control. The result? Millions of Americans walked the halls of the People's House, but left with nothing more than memories and a souvenir postcard. In 2015, Michelle Obama ended the rule. In a viral video, she tore up a no photos sign with a smile. From then on, tourists could snap selfies, record memories, and instantly share them with the world. The paradox is striking. One of the most heavily guarded buildings on Earth opened its doors to the age of Instagram. For decades, the White House image was controlled by official photographers. Suddenly, it was in the hands of millions of smartphone users. The symbolism was powerful. The White House shifted from a space of solemn control to one of shared experience. A house not just for presidents, but for the people who visited. At first glance, the White House's long list of bans might read like a comedy sketch in history. Broccoli exiled from the dinner table, squirrels branded as public enemies, even uninvited party crashers sneaking into a state dinner. But look closer, and these seemingly trivial tales sketch a surprisingly honest portrait of power and of the people who wield it. Yes, it's the global nerve center of politics, but it's also, quite literally, a home where lawns were torn up by squirrels, where sitting rooms once filled with cigar smoke, where children and presidents wrinkled their noses at green vegetables. It's a reminder, presidents aren't superhumans. They carry personal tastes, habits, beliefs, and petty irritations just like the rest of us. But once seated in that chair of power, even the smallest annoyance can be elevated into national policy. We usually imagine history written by grand events, wars, treaties, economic crises. Yet sometimes it's the smallest details that capture the bigger transformation. Women wearing pants in the White House signaled more than fashion. It marked a stride toward gender equality. The smoking ban wasn't just about health. It revealed a national shift in consciousness. Michelle Obama tearing down the no photos sign wasn't simply about selfies. It symbolized transparency in the digital age. The paradox is plain. What looks trivial can reveal the turning points of culture and politics. If there's one lesson from all these odd bans, it's this. Great power must still wrestle with small things. Because history isn't only forged in treaties and speeches. It's also tucked into dinner menus, dress codes, and yes, even a drifting balloon over the South lawn. That's why those of us who study history often chuckle, then pause to reflect. Sometimes what shapes a nation isn't the canon, it's the taste buds. And if you'd like to uncover more presidential quirks, more strange bands, more human moments hidden behind solemn walls, stay with us. Because the deeper we dig into history, the more we discover this enduring truth. The absurd is often the most real.